Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital official channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up.
The late afternoon sun cast long, distorted shadows across the polished concrete floor of the warehouse, turning the cavernous space into a gallery of abstract, shifting shapes. Sonny Corinthos stood at the massive window overlooking the Port Charles waterfront, a crystal tumbler of amber whiskey cradled in his hand. The ice had long since melted, diluting the liquor, but he hadn't taken a sip in nearly 20 minutes. He was waiting. The air in the room was thick, heavy with the scent of old wood, diesel fumes from the docks, and the ever-present, unshakable tension that was the background radiation of his life. These moments of quiet were deceptive. They were not peaceful, they were the calm in the eye of the hurricane, a temporary stillness that promised an imminent and violent conclusion to the storm. He'd been feeling it for days, a prickling on the back of his neck, a sense of a tectonic plate shifting deep beneath the foundations of his world. Carly had noticed his restlessness, attributing it to the ongoing troubles with the emerging Balkan cartel. Jason had offered his quiet, steadfast support, ready to mobilize at a moment's notice. But this feeling was different. It was more personal, a ghost from a past he had tried, and failed, to entomb. The heavy steel door at the far end of the warehouse ground open, the sound echoing sharply in the vast emptiness. Sonny didn't turn. He knew the footfalls. They were measured, solid, but carried unfamiliar hesitancy. Nathan West. Sonny, Nathan's voice cut through the silence, younger than Jason's, less weathered, but laced with a gravity that made Sonny finally turn from the window. Nathan looked harried. His usually crisp button-down shirt was rumpled, the sleeves rolled up haphazardly. There was a faint sheen of sweat on his brow, and his eyes, usually so clear and direct, darted around the warehouse as if checking for unseen listeners. This was not the confident, by-the-book detective, nor the devoted husband and father Sonny had come to respect. This was a man standing on the edge of a precipice, holding a secret so volatile he seemed afraid it might detonate in his hands. "Nathan," Sonny said, his voice a low rumble. He gestured with the tumbler towards a pair of leather armchairs situated near a low, scarred wooden table. "You sounded urgent on the phone." Nathan didn't move towards the chairs. He stood rooted to the spot, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. It's... God, Sonny, I don't even know how to say this. I've been going over it in my head for the last 12 hours, and there's no good way. Sonny's eyes narrowed. He set the tumbler down on the table with a definitive click. "Just say it. Is it Maxie? The kids?" No, they're fine. Everyone's physically fine." Nathan ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. It's about the past. About something that happened that we all thought was over." A cold knot began to tighten in Sonny's stomach. The past was a minefield he navigated daily, but Nathan was not a denizen of his darker history. Their connection was through Maxie, through the present. What about the past? Nathan finally took a few stumbling steps forward, leaning heavily on the back of one of the armchairs. He looked Sonny directly in the eyes, and the raw, unchecked turmoil in his gaze was terrifying. "I need you to promise me something before I tell you." You can't react." "Not yet. You have to hear me out. All of it." "You're starting to scare me, Nathan," Sonny said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Just tell me what the hell is going on." Nathan took a deep, shuddering breath, as if steeling himself for a physical blow. "It's about Morgan. Your son, Morgan." The name hung in the air between them, a sacred, painful relic. Sonny flinched as if struck. The mere mention of his son's name was like a fresh wound being torn open. The memory of that day was a permanent scar on his soul, the frantic phone calls, the panicked drive to the garage, the sight of the smoldering wreckage, the overwhelming, soul-crushing certainty that his boy was gone. The grief had been a living entity, a beast that had nearly consumed him, that had shattered his marriage to Carly, that had sent him spiraling into a darkness from which he had only recently begun to emerge. "Don't," Sonny growled, a warning flashing in his dark eyes. "Don't you say his name. Not like this. Not in some context that's going to drag his memory through the mud." He's at peace. Let him stay that way. He's not at peace, Sonny, Nathan blurted out, his voice cracking with emotion. Because he's not dead. The words didn't make sense. They were a jumble of syllables, a nonsense phrase spoken in a language Sonny didn't understand. He stared at Nathan, his mind refusing to process the statement. It was too monumental, too catastrophic. The floor beneath him seemed to tilt. What did you say? Sonny's voice was dangerously quiet. Morgan is alive. This time, the words landed. They slammed into Sonny's chest with the force of a wrecking ball, stealing the air from his lungs. He took an involuntary step back, his hand groping for the edge of the table to steady himself. The world seemed to shrink, the vast warehouse collapsing in until the only things that existed were him, Nathan, and those three impossible, earth-shattering words. No, Sonny whispered, shaking his head. No. That's not possible. I saw the car, the explosion. There was nothing left. We buried him. His voice rose, becoming a ragged shout. We buried my son. I know. I know you did. Nathan said, his own voice rising to match Sonny's. I was there, remember? I saw the grief. I saw what it did to you, to Carly, to Michael, to Jocelyn. I watched it tear your family apart. Do you think I would come here and say this if I wasn't 1000% sure? If I didn't have proof? Proof? Sonny echoed, the word a lifeline in a sea of madness. What proof? What could possibly prove that my son, who was blown to pieces in a car bomb meant for me, is alive? Nathan straightened up, his detective's instincts momentarily overriding his personal anguish. It started with a cold case review. An unrelated thing, a financial crime syndicate we've been tracking for months. We got a warrant to monitor some offshore server traffic. The data was a mess, encrypted, routed through a dozen different proxies. It took our cybercrimes unit weeks to crack the layers. We were looking for money trails, shell corporations. He paused, swallowing hard. We found a lot more than that. Buried deep in the data, in a partitioned server with biometric locks, we found medical files. Extensive ones. Photos, videos, neurological scans, psychiatric evaluations. What does that have to do with Morgan? Sonny demanded, his patience, his sanity, stretched to its absolute limit. The subject of the files was listed as Project Chimera, Nathan said, his voice dropping back to a hushed, horrified tone. But the facial recognition software flagged him. It's a new protocol we implemented last year. It runs all digital evidence against a database of missing persons and deceased individuals with open-ended case files. The system got a hit. A 99.8% match. Nathan pulled his phone from his pocket, his hands trembling so badly he almost dropped it. He tapped the screen a few times, his movements jerky, and then held it out to Sonny. This is from 6 months ago. Sonny didn't want to look. He wanted to throw the phone across the room, to scream at Nathan for this cruel, twisted joke. But a force greater than his own will compel him to step forward and take the device. The screen showed a grainy, black and white video still, clearly taken from a security camera. It was a man, seen from the side, sitting in a sterile-looking room, dressed in plain gray sweats. His head was bowed, his shoulders slumped. The image was poor, the angle awkward. But the profile, the set of the jaw, the curve of the ear, the tousled hair. Sonny's breath hitched. It was like looking at a ghost. A younger, healthier ghost than the one in his memory. It's a coincidence, Sonny choked out, but his voice lacked all conviction. The knot in his stomach had turned to ice. A trick of the light. Someone who looks like him. Keep scrolling, Nathan instructed, his voice thick with pity. Sonny's thumb, numb and clumsy, swiped the screen. The next image was a color photograph, clearer. The same man, standing now, facing the camera. He was thinner than Morgan had been, his face more gaunt, with a network of fine lines around his eyes that spoke of prolonged stress. His eyes, they were Morgan's eyes. The same shade, the same shape. But the light in them was gone. The fiery, impulsive spark that had defined his son was extinguished, replaced by a hollow, vacant stare. It was a look of profound trauma, of a soul that had been shattered and put back together wrong. A low, guttural sound escaped Sonny's throat. It was a noise of pure, undiluted agony. His legs gave way, and he collapsed into the armchair behind him, the phone clattering to the floor. He buried his face in his hands, his entire body shaking. No, 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 no. Nathan quickly retrieved the phone and knelt in front of him. Sonny, listen to me. You have to listen. The files, they're extensive. They detail everything. The bomb was real. The crash was real. But he was pulled from the wreckage before it exploded. It was a setup from the beginning. A meticulously planned extraction. Sonny looked up, his face a mask of tearless grief and burgeoning rage. Who? The single word was a venomous promise of vengeance. The organization behind it calls itself the Chimera Group. We don't know much about them yet. They're a shadow, a ghost. But their methodology, it's about asset acquisition. They don't deal in money or weapons. They deal in people. They identify individuals with specific potentials. People who are in unique positions, or who have unique psychological profiles. They create scenarios, elaborate, traumatic events, to kill them, and then they take them. They break them down, reprogram them, and rebuild them into assets. Spies, sleeper agents, pawns in their global games. They took my son, Sonny said, the words barely audible. They took my boy and they did what to him? The files call it cognitive recalibration, Nathan said, the clinical term sounding obscene in the context. They used a combination of drugs, sensory deprivation, and psychological torture to suppress his original memories, his identity. They wanted to erase Morgan Corinthos completely and create a blank slate they could mold into whatever they needed. Project Chimera was their attempt to build the perfect, deniable operative from the son of a powerful crime lord. Someone with intimate knowledge of your organization, your family, your weaknesses. The horror of it unfolded in Sonny's mind like a poisonous flower. The grief, the funeral, the years of pain, all of it had been a lie, orchestrated by some faceless, soulless entity. And while they had been mourning, Morgan had been alive, trapped in a nightmare, being systematically torn apart and remade. Where is he? Sonny's voice was steel now, all grief momentarily burned away by a white-hot fury. Where is he right now? That's the problem, Nathan said, his expression grim. We don't know. The server we hacked was a backup, an archive. It hadn't been actively updated in over 4 months. The last entry was a transfer order. He was moved from their primary conditioning facility to an active theater. The location was redacted. But the timing, it coincides with the first rumblings of the Balkan cartel's move into Port Charles. The pieces, the horrible, monstrous pieces, began to click into place in Sonny's mind. The feeling of being watched, the precision of his rival's moves, the sense that someone was always one step ahead. It hadn't been paranoia. It had been foresight. They sent him here? Sonny whispered, a fresh wave of dread washing over him. They sent my son, my brainwashed son, back to Port Charles to work against me? It's a hypothesis, but a strong one, Nathan confirmed. Think about it, Sonny. What better weapon to use against you than the son you thought was dead? Someone who could get close to Carly, to Michael, to Jocelyn. Someone you would never see as a threat until it was too late. He wouldn't even know he was being used. He would believe whatever identity they've implanted in him. The implications were a bottomless pit of terror. Morgan, here in the city, walking among them. A stranger wearing his son's face, a loaded gun pointed at the heart of his family. He could be anyone, a new face at the warehouse, a bartender at the Metro Court, a stranger on the street. He could have already spoken to his mother, his brother, his sister, and they would have had no idea. Sonny surged to his feet, a restless, caged energy propelling him across the room. He needed to act. He needed to find his son. He needed to tear this chimera group apart with his bare hands. Jason, he barked, pulling out his own phone. I need to call Jason. We need to lock down the city. We need to find him before. No! Nathan said, jumping up and grabbing Sonny's arm. Sonny, stop! You promised you'd hear me out. This isn't a situation you can solve with guns and threats. The hell it isn't. Sonny roared, shaking him off. They have my son. And if you go in guns blazing, you'll get him killed. Nathan shot back, his own fear giving way to a desperate intensity. Listen to me. This is bigger than you, bigger than your organization. This is an international intelligence nightmare. The PCPD, the FBI, the CIA, they've all had fragments of intel on the Chimera Group for years. This is the first real break anyone has ever gotten. If you go public with this, if you start a war on the streets, you will spook them. And their protocol for compromised assets is termination. They will kill Morgan the second they think he's been exposed or is no longer useful. They'll make his first death look like a picnic. The logic, cold and brutal, was a bucket of ice water on Sonny's fury. He stood, chest heaving, trapped between the primal need to protect his child and the horrifying realization that any wrong move could be the one that signed Morgan's death warrant. So what are you saying? Sonny asked, his voice ragged. We do nothing? We let him wander around, a puppet for these monsters, possibly a danger to himself and everyone he ever loved? No, Nathan said firmly. We work this like the investigation it is. A quiet, careful, deliberate investigation. My captain and the DA are already looped in, but it's a very, very small circle. The official story is that we're investigating the Balkan cartel. Only 3 of us know the truth about Morgan. We have to keep it that way. He moved closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You cannot tell anyone, Sonny. Not yet. Not Carly. Not Michael. Not Jason. Especially not Jason. You know he'd move heaven and earth for you, and the second he knows, he'll start a war that we can't control. The emotion, it's too big. You have to box it up. You have to lock it away. Not tell Carly? Sonny was aghast. Nathan, you're asking me to keep the fact that her son is alive a secret from her? After the hell she's been through? That's inhuman. It's necessary, Nathan insisted, his own face pained. He thought of Maxie, of how he would feel in Sonny's position, and the thought was unbearable. Carly is not a subtle woman. Her joy, her grief, her hope, it's all written on her face. If she knows, she will look at every stranger on the street with a new hope. She will be searching for him in every crowd. The Chimera Group will see it from a mile away. They have watchers everywhere. The second they suspect the family knows, Morgan is dead. You have to trust me on this. Sonny turned back to the window, staring out at the lights of the city beginning to twinkle in the twilight. His city. And somewhere out there, in the gathering darkness, was his son. Alive. Suffering. Lost. The joy of that first, shattering revelation was now completely subsumed by a new, more profound terror. The weight of the secret felt like it would crush him. What do we do? Sonny asked, his voice hollow. We wait. We watch, Nathan said, coming to stand beside him. My team is analyzing every byte of data from that server. We're looking for patterns, for clues to his current identity, for a location. We're monitoring all new arrivals in the city, all unusual financial activity. You need to go about your business. Be vigilant, but be normal. Look for anyone who seems out of place, anyone who seems to be paying an unusual amount of attention to you or your family, but for God's sake, don't confront them. Report it to me, and only to me. And when we find him? Sonny asked, the question hanging in the air between them. What then? How do we get him back? How do we fix what they've done to him? Nathan was silent for a long moment. I don't know, he admitted softly. I'm a detective, not a psychiatrist. Reversing that level of conditioning, it's uncharted territory. The first step is getting him to safety. Getting him away from them. Then we help him remember. We help him come home. Come home. The words were a bittersweet torture. Morgan's home was a charred wreckage of a memory. His family was a collection of ghosts from a life that had been stolen from him. His father was a stranger he might have been programmed to kill. The two men stood in silence for a long time, watching the night fully claim the city. The warehouse was no longer just a place of business, it had become the command center for the most delicate, dangerous operation of Sonny Corinthos' life. The war wasn't with a rival cartel. It wasn't for territory or money. It was a war for a soul. His son's soul. Nathan finally placed a hesitant hand on Sonny's shoulder. I have to go. I can't be seen here for too long. I'll be in touch the second I know anything. Anything at all. Sonny just gave a curt, numb nod, unable to speak. As Nathan's footsteps receded and the steel door clanged shut, Sonny was left alone in the vast, silent darkness. The ghost of his son was no longer a memory. It was a living, breathing man, a weapon pointed at the heart of his world. The joy and the horror were intertwined, a double-edged sword piercing him through. He looked down at his phone, at the screensaver, a picture of all his children, taken at Christmas years ago. Morgan was there, his arm thrown around a laughing Jocelyn, his smile bright and unburdened. Alive. A single, hot tear finally escaped, tracing a path down Sonny's cheek. He didn't wipe it away. He let it fall, a solitary testament to a hope that was as terrifying as it was beautiful. I'll find you, Morgan, he whispered into the empty warehouse, his voice a raw pledge. I lost you once. I won't lose you again. Whatever it takes. Whatever it costs. Outside, the city hummed with its usual, oblivious energy. But for Sonny Corinthos, the world had just ended and begun again, all in the space of a single, shocking conversation. The game had changed. The board was reset. And the most important piece, the one he thought was gone forever, was back in play. The fight for Morgan Corinthos had just begun. The walls of Sonny Corinthos' world have been crumbling lately, with his empire under fire and his family life more fragile than ever, but nothing could have prepared him for the moment Nathan stepped forward with news that would shake him to his very core. For years, Sonny has carried the grief of losing his son Morgan, haunted by the night his world was shattered when Morgan's car exploded, the tragic accident fueled by a tangled web of rivalries, betrayals, and secrets. Sonny believed Morgan's death was the ultimate consequence of his own choices, the final proof that his dangerous lifestyle came at a cost too great to bear. Every time he thought of Morgan's smile or his struggles with bipolar disorder, Sonny replayed the what-ifs that might have saved him, and no matter how many times he tried to bury the pain, it always clawed its way back to the surface. But now, Nathan was standing in front of him, his face pale but his eyes sharp, carrying words that would rewrite history. Morgan Corinthos is alive. At first, Sonny couldn't process what Nathan was saying. The words didn't fit in his mind, like trying to force a broken puzzle together. His initial reaction was anger. He accused Nathan of playing games, of being manipulated, of spreading lies. Sonny demanded proof, his voice rising as though sheer volume could shield him from the hope threatening to rise in his chest. Carly, standing nearby, was just as shaken. Her eyes filled with tears, but her hand clutched her chest as if bracing against a wave that might crush her. She had mourned Morgan in the most visceral way a mother could, throwing herself into denial, rage, and finally acceptance, and now Nathan was telling her that the child she buried wasn't gone at all. The disbelief crackled in the air, a storm waiting to break. Nathan didn't flinch, though. He explained that for years, layers of secrets had been protecting Morgan's survival, and only now, with the right trail uncovered, could the truth come out. He revealed that Morgan never died in the explosion, though everyone had been led to believe otherwise. In the chaos of that night, when smoke and fire swallowed the wreckage, the assumption had been that Morgan was lost. But Nathan had pieced together evidence that showed otherwise, whispers from witnesses, medical records buried deep, and transactions made under aliases tied to Morgan's disappearance. Someone had taken Morgan, spirited him away from Port Charles, and forced him into a life no one in his family knew about. The magnitude of Nathan's claim rocked Sonny to his core. His grief had fueled so many decisions since Morgan's supposed death. It had nearly destroyed his marriage, driven wedges between his children, and set him on violent paths of vengeance. If Morgan was alive, then all those years of torment had been built on a falsehood. Sonny's fists clenched as rage and hope battled inside him. Who would do something this cruel? Who would dare to rob a father of his son, to make a family grieve, only to use Morgan as a pawn in some larger scheme? As Nathan laid out the pieces, it became clear that this wasn't just a matter of survival, it was a matter of deliberate manipulation. He explained that Morgan had been hidden away, his condition monitored, and his existence kept secret by a network of people who benefited from keeping him away from his family. The reasons weren't fully known yet, but the evidence pointed toward a powerful enemy with deep resources, someone who could orchestrate such a disappearance and cover up without leaving a trace. Carly gasped as the possibility sank in. If Morgan had been alive all this time, then every tear, every sleepless night, every time she thought she heard his voice calling to her, it hadn't been grief playing tricks. It had been her instincts, a mother's unshakable bond, whispering the truth her mind couldn't accept. Sonny, torn between fury and desperate yearning, demanded to know where Morgan was. Nathan, however, urged caution. The truth was only beginning to unfold, and the situation was far more dangerous than Sonny realized. Morgan wasn't simply hiding, he was trapped in a web of control that needed to be carefully unraveled before anyone could bring him home. If Sonny acted rashly, he could put his son in more danger than ever. This only fueled Sonny's rage, his voice trembling with the force of his emotions as he vowed that nothing and no one would stand in the way of him reclaiming his son. But beneath the bluster, Sonny's heart ached with something he hadn't felt in years, hope. The image of Morgan alive, breathing, speaking, smiling, even after all this time, flickered in his mind. He couldn't stop the memories from rushing back, the sound of Morgan's laughter, the spark in his eyes when he challenged his father, the tender moments when he sought his approval. Carly, equally overwhelmed, stepped closer to Sonny, her hand finding his, their shared grief momentarily transforming into shared astonishment. Their son, their Morgan, could be alive. The weight of Nathan's revelation pressed down on the room like a storm cloud refusing to break. Sonny's eyes burned with intensity as he paced, his mind racing with possibilities. Every instinct in him screamed to move, to take action, to track down Morgan and bring him home at any cost. But Nathan's calm, methodical tone urged him to slow down, to understand that this wasn't something brute force could fix. Morgan's survival wasn't a simple miracle, it was the result of careful orchestration, and whoever had engineered it had the power to keep him hidden all these years. Carly couldn't stop trembling, her emotions ricocheting between hope and terror. She had dreamed of this moment countless times, imagined Morgan walking through the door, imagined hearing his voice again, imagined what she would say if she ever got the chance. But the idea that her son had been alive all these years while she mourned at his grave tore through her like glass. Who had kept this secret? Why hadn't he come home? Had he been suffering, scared, calling out for her? The questions consumed her, but above them all rose one desperate truth: she needed to see her son with her own eyes. Nathan explained that Morgan had been seen recently, though not directly in Port Charles. A contact of his had traced records of someone fitting Morgan's description, older now, harder, with a guarded expression, in a remote medical facility overseas. The young man was being kept under observation, supposedly for his mental health, though Nathan suggested there was more to it. His bipolar disorder, which had always been a battle for him, had likely been exploited by whoever was controlling his life. If Morgan believed he was unstable, or if he had been manipulated into thinking he couldn't survive without their help, then he might not even know how to find his way back to his family. The idea of someone twisting Morgan's vulnerabilities for their own gain made Sonny's blood boil. As the shock began to settle, Sonny's mind returned to the night of the explosion. He could still hear the ringing in his ears, smell the smoke, see the twisted wreckage that everyone said had consumed his son. He remembered the unbearable weight of guilt crushing him, knowing Morgan had been behind the wheel because of choices Sonny had made. To now be told that Morgan hadn't died in that fireball, that he had been stolen away under the cover of tragedy, left Sonny feeling both betrayed and invigorated. He had been living in penance for a sin that wasn't real, and now he had a chance to undo it all, to save his son, to reclaim what had been ripped away. Carly clutched Nathan's arm, her voice breaking as she demanded details. Was Morgan safe? Did he know they were still fighting for him? Was he being hurt? Nathan assured her that, from everything he uncovered, Morgan was alive and under tight watch. But the danger wasn't physical injury as much as it was psychological manipulation. Morgan's mind had always been fragile, and years of separation, isolation, and control could leave scars just as deep as any wound. Carly's tears flowed freely at the thought of her son being alone, convinced he was forgotten. She vowed aloud that she would move heaven and earth to show Morgan that he was loved, that he was wanted, that he had never been abandoned. The magnitude of the revelation began to ripple beyond Sonny and Carly. Dante, standing in the background, had been silent until now, his face stricken with disbelief. The idea that his half-brother was alive after all this time was almost too much to bear. He had been the one to hold his father back during the darkest days of grief, the one to remind Sonny to keep moving, to keep living, even when guilt consumed him. Now, Dante realized, everything they had endured had been under false pretenses. His heart swelled with cautious hope, but his training as a cop kicked in. He urged his father to be careful, to let the facts lead them instead of rushing in with guns blazing. Sonny barely heard him. His mind was already planning, already plotting every step. Whoever had stolen his son from him was going to pay, and Sonny Corinthos never forgot a debt. But beneath the fury, there was a flicker of something far more dangerous, hope. He had mourned Morgan so completely that to now envision a reunion felt almost unbearable. What if it wasn't true? What if Nathan was wrong? What if this was a trap designed to lure Sonny into a vulnerable position? The doubts whispered at the edges of his mind, but he shoved them away, unwilling to extinguish the fragile flame that had been rekindled in his heart. Carly, though equally overwhelmed, took Nathan's side in urging caution. She reminded Sonny that if Morgan truly was alive, they couldn't risk driving him deeper into danger by making reckless moves. Their son's well-being had to come first, even if that meant waiting for more information. Sonny clenched his fists but gave a tight nod, though his eyes betrayed the storm raging within. He wasn't good at waiting, not when his family was involved. Every second Morgan spent away from him was another second stolen, another second of suffering. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken emotion. In the distance, the faint hum of Port Charles life carried on, people going about their routines, unaware that a secret of monumental proportions was unraveling. Inside that room, though, time had stopped. A father, a mother, and a brother had just been told that the son they buried, the sibling they mourned, was alive.